or two more. All right. Looks like we're good to go. Well, good morning. I just wanted to start the combined action team meeting. We combined both the residential resilience and the governance coordination meetings as we start to wind down and move towards our final report for the flood task force. So for today's agenda, we have our is slightly revised because we've had some timeline changes. So we want to update you as action team members as well as the public to make sure that folks are all on the same page with the timing of this flood task force. We will go over the FY24 budget priority. We've talked about that at the last few meetings. There's just a few more things to emphasize there. The update on the insurance options, again, this conversation has been lengthy, which is an important piece to this flood task force establishment and what we will do moving forward to help with the flood resiliency and recovery during flood events. We'll also talk about the workflow for drainage complaint. We had that on the agenda with our last combined meeting. We ran out of time because we had such a great point of conversation on the other items. So we want to address it at this meeting and give some time to that. And then we'll talk about the flood task force final report layout, and we'll give you kind of an introduction on what we are starting to create as a format and an outline of how we're going to plug in all the content from this year's long work. And then we will close out our meeting with next steps. Next slide, please. So the summary of the task force, just the background of how we got started and why we're doing this. The city administrator convened and established the flood task force in September of 2021. This task force reports directly to the deputy mayor of operations and infrastructure. And we have two co-chairs, the CEO from DC Water, Mr. David Gaddis, and the director from DOEE, Mr. Tommy Wells. The meeting for the flood task force, the full flood task force, was kicked off back in November of 2021. We are a year in work in progress right now, so this is quite exciting of all we've done so far. And making sure that everything is open to the public. We are fully transparent. We want to make sure the public engages, the public has access and input in this process. We've had all the task force and action team meetings posted online with the schedule for people to participate. And we also have the archives of all the meetings. Some of them have recordings as well as the minutes are available on the website. And that website is dcfloodtaskforce.org. We also have resources that contribute to the conversation and give a little bit more background on what we're talking about with the task force as well. Again, that website is dcfloodtaskforce.org. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier, we have made some adjustments to this task force schedule. We've done more. There's more time needed for some of this conversation that we've been having, especially in the insurance space. So the flood task force meets every other month, on the third Wednesday of the month. Our next full task force meeting will be Wednesday, November 16th. We have action team meetings. We previously had action team meetings on two different schedules. Now we have consolidated and we have a combined action team meeting that meets on the second Friday of each month. And it's mostly due to the fact that we have a lot of consolidated information that's overlapping. So it's perfect time to now, as we finalize this first portion of our task force, we're now having these combined meetings. And then we have our flood task force final report that's been adjusted to now February of 2023. We'll have all the action plans addressed in this final report, and they will cover all 9 categories that we've been talking about since the beginning. The final report, once that's completed, we will meet annually as flood task force members. The annual meetings will be, the purpose of that will be to track the progress of the action plans that we've been discussing and putting forth, and also to continue to discuss budgeting and action plan priorities. Next slide, please. So we have those 2 action teams that we talked about. Now they're combined, but when we did have them as 2 action teams separate, residential resilience covered categories 1 through 4, and governance and coordination covered categories 5 through 9. Next slide, please. So with that, we will get started with the meeting. We have Meredith Upchurch from DOEE, and she will discuss the FY24 budget priorities. Meredith, good morning.
Hello, good morning. This is Meredith Upchurch. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so just to give everyone a refresher of where we are, FY24 budget planning is ongoing right now. I know at least for DOEE, we prepared our budget requests and have already submitted those to our finance team the end of last week. So I assume other agencies are on that same schedule, and then they're due into the Office of Budget and Planning in just a couple weeks. Federal funding, grants, and formula funding requests are ongoing, and some are aligned with the budget cycle as well. So our plan for the task force is to not submit any budget requests, but to support any requests that agencies are submitting as budget enhancements, to show that support and to help bolster that those budget requests will be funded. So we're creating a list of all the budget requests, and we've been working with all of you. We've gotten many agency inputs into our list, and I just want to emphasize, please make sure if you have a budget request for FY24 that you want the task force to specifically, give their support for, make sure it's on this list. Send that information to me. So let's go to the next slide. We can review. This is still draft. This is still a work in progress. We're working to fill in these numbers, fill in these projects. But we're getting input from multiple agencies here. Many of this information came from the action plans. Many of it's been updated by DOE, HCMA. We've gotten information from DDOT. DC Water is working on their information right now, as well as DISB. So so this you can look at this. If anything's missing, if anything needs to be changed, send it over to me. I'll send out another reminder email in case anybody doesn't have the link or the source spreadsheet for this. Can you go to the next slide? This is our infrastructure project list. Again, we're still working to fill in the numbers on these. We do have some information with from DDOT. We need to sort through it a little bit to see what fits in these different FY23 and FY24 columns. And there are still some projects kind of in process to develop some grant requests for the FEMA BRIC grant with HCMA. I know DOEE and DDOT and DPR are all working on some requests in that realm. So we've got a good list of projects here. We want to make sure we're getting all the information in here so we can show which ones are actually going to be in a request in FY24. That's all I have, but I'd like to give the opportunity for anybody to shout out if you want to have a project added to the list or any update at this point. Hearing
So Meredith,
no questions here. Yep, go ahead, Monty.
I was just going to say, Meredith, just to chime in, we've brought this up over the course of maybe the last 2 or 3 meetings because we want to make sure that each of the agencies have an opportunity to add to this list. We talked about in previous meetings how this could be kind of like a seal of coordination, having the flood task force kind of amplifying your request. Not to say that it's going to do anything in particular, but we're hoping that there will be some different look and feel to it because there's this combined effort as all the agencies are coordinating on the flood resiliency. So again, the importance of this list is we find it to be crucial. So we want to make sure that agencies get a chance to get their requests listed here. And I know DPW might have a couple of things too, so maybe there's some other agencies that want to speak up. If not, reach out to Meredith offline.
Nick, did you want to add anything?
No, thanks though.
Okay. Okay, well, I think we can move to the next topic. Thanks.
Thanks, Meredith. Okay, so we have an update on the insurance options, and this discussion is led by Nick Bonart from DOE. So Nick, take it.
Thanks, Monty. And just a really quick housekeeping item. There's a few folks stuck on, they can't get into WebEx. And Stephanie, if you're on, is there, I send you some emails. Is there a way you can send them a new link or another link?
Yeah. Just go ahead, send them my way, and I'll try and get them on.
Okay. All right, I'll tell them to do that. Okay. All right, so update on insurance options. And actually, since I'm talking, I'm gonna put myself on the Teams meeting too. Okay, so update on insurance options. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that we're still in conversations. We've got a couple different action plans going on the flood insurance options, and there's still a lot to be decided in the next 12 months. But talking with colleagues at DISB and ORM and DC Water, we felt that it was important to put in a budget request for this year so that come October of 2023, we would have some funding to be able to start to put in place something to do with insurance that we've been talking a lot about in the past couple of months in the task force. So what we did is so DOE put in a budget enhancement request for FY24. We kept it high level, and essentially the request was for almost $800,000, roughly 300,000 of which was for a staff person, as well as some like software and hardware that would be required to track people who are getting payouts, as well as be able to like verify that floods actually happened. And then the majority of it, the $500,000, is essentially it's enough to pay $2,000 each to 250 households, and that 250 number is roughly the amount of households that we've documented with flooding after the September 10th, 2020 event. So that was kind of the initial ask. I think in future years we'll also potentially increase that ask to include some kind of second layer of coverage, beyond the $2,000. But this is kind of based on the conversations and some of the initial proposals from both ORM and DASB on kind of the need for like an immediate payout. So that's where we are. I think we'll put the DOE will put in the budget request this right now, but I think our assumption is there'll be some conversations about what agency will best be able to execute on this if we get money. So it may not be DOE that ultimately is like implementing this program. So that's my update on that. Anything to add, Meredith, or any questions?
Hey, Nick, Jed Ross, how are you?
I did.
Real fast, wanted to, you had reached out to me and I appreciate it. definitely think it's good to put something in for the 2024, but I still am, I still feel pretty strongly, it's great that DOE has done so. I still think that something should come from the task force to the mayor's budget director. I think that is going to be the most effective way to ensure that that particular enhancement will get funded, whether it's for DOE or any agency. I do think that there's a stronger likelihood of success when it comes from this fantastic group effort. And I just wanted to put that out there rather than it being, an individual budget review team meeting for DOEE. Doesn't mean that it can't happen in that meeting, but there should be some formal, document or recommendation from the task force, recommending that and any other budget enhancement requests in a combined location and place for the budget review team to review. So that's just my recommendation on how to be most successful in managing the budget process for the task force.
No, that's great. And I know we've got Jonathan and Alan from Demois, and just hearing what Jed said, I've never done a budget request like that before, and I don't know. I think we're kind of in new territory with like the task force, and so is there any, Alan and Jonathan, any ideas on what form?
I can jump in here
Comparative,
first.
yeah.
I think as we're already planning to do the vote for, the task force support to the budgets at the November 16th meeting, the outcome of that could be a memo to the city administrator, whoever the appropriate recipient is for that, showing that the task force supports these budget requests.
Yeah, I think
That's
that'll be
easy next step.
one helpful opportunity. And that timing really lines up with, some of the agencies are going to be having their first BRT meetings in November. The capital budget might happen a little later, those BRT meetings. But no, I agree with what Director Ross said. I think where individual agencies are requesting enhancements from the task force, but that are within their own budgets, you should definitely flag like this is part of the flood task force. The whole task force supports this as like one piece of the comprehensive recommendations. But there probably is another way to, just have them all in one place as well for OBPM to consider whenever they do. I think another opportunity to, I was actually just talking with our legislative advisor at Demois. When the task force report is final, it needs to go through IQ. Probably most people are familiar with that process, and OCA and OBPM kind of, are looking at all the budget implications at that time too. So, that'll be, it shouldn't be any surprise, like what, especially here where we have a very like concrete list of likely enhancements for operating and capital. So they should be aware of what is in the report that has budget implications, like just through the IQ process, which I guess, it kind of all sounds like the timing is convenient. Just for when, like when that review would happen, even before February, probably, I would think, where the report, because it takes a month or so in IQ, for a report of this size. So we would be aiming, I might as well mention that to the group, we would be aiming to get the report into IQ, in early, like end of December, really early January, maybe, ideally, like to really make sure we meet the legislative deadline so that everyone in IQ can review it. But yeah, that's where, people raise questions about the budget implications. Like we're actually just seeing that with the lead pipe replacement task force now, and really the same process. So yeah, I agree with what Director Ross said, that, there's definitely a way to, and for the capital things, I think that's more common where in those budget review team meetings, we can look at like this whole initiative and not just, we don't want the perception to be that these are just one-off requests from each agency, and kind of like carry less weight that way. So yeah, I think we should definitely be calling out that these are all kind of part of the larger solution, and maybe we don't really get the impact we're looking for if we pick and choose. Like, we don't want to do all or nothing, I guess, and risk nothing, but yeah, just really emphasizing that this is like the package of recommendations.
And maybe just to drill down on the details a little bit. So we'll vote. So in November, so 2 weeks from now, November 16th, we'll vote, to like approve action plans, but not all action plans have funding requests attached to them. A lot of them do, but not all. And and some have funding requests attached to them, but not in FY24. So I think what I'm trying to get at is, so we'll have this vote, and I think we can pretty clearly say, assuming everything gets approved, we can say, the task force is behind each and every one of these action plans. And then maybe there's a section, there's a separate memo that picks out all of the FY24 enhancement requests that are related to the task force, and then lists them, I guess. And I mean, like, that's basically the memo. There'll be, a beginning and an end, but
Yeah.
does that
That could
sound
work.
right?
And then keeping in mind that I guess for capital, it would be like a 6-year window. But yeah, I think that would be useful.
Okay. And then
Yeah,
just
for the capital projects, we had not gone beyond FY24 because it was just hard enough just to get to FY24. So at this point, we don't have anything projected beyond that. Are you saying we should have that projection?
No, not necessarily. I guess, they could just, but it's almost like we obviously want them as soon as possible, I guess. So it would be up to them to say, well, we can afford it in FY26 or something, I guess, for, the CIP. So.
Right.
Even within the task force recommendations, is there a need to prioritize?
I mean, that might not be the worst idea. Yeah, because otherwise, I think, yeah, I would expect the budget process, like people would ask those questions. They're going to look at the size of the dollar amounts, but yeah, I think they would want to know, like, if we're unable to fund everything here in FY24, what's most urgent.
Right.
I just wanted to share that there's a note in the chat from Opera at DC Water. She said, thank you, Jed, Director Ross, for your comments, and she agrees. And also to let you know that, let the task force know that are on this call right now, we've been working on a brief to have the city administrator be up to date on what's been going on with the task force and how it's winding down with some specific recommendations. So this is definitely tracking with what we've been trying to do all along, which is making sure we're summarizing the activities, giving some light to where we are and where we're going to be moving forward in terms of a final recommendation. So with that, I think it's just right online with what you guys are saying.
all right. Well, so it sounds like we have a good path forward on this memo, which we can work on after November 16th. But just a heads up to all of the agencies on this call. So I know what DOE has submitted in their enhancement request. I do not know what you have submitted. So if you want to be on this letter, you'll need to send it to us. So I'll be asking for that probably after November 16th, but just a heads up in advance.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing that's on our budget list. Like, that's the intent of the budget list, is to, an FY24 budget request, local budget request means an enhancement.
Right.
So that's the list we're sourcing from.
I guess I'm drawing the distinction that I hope this is not the case, but folks might think that if they're on the list that appears on this PowerPoint that has somehow made it up to other budgets. But I'm just trying to reiterate that it can be on our list, but unless you also put it in your agency's budget request, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, Nick, I think that's an important point to emphasize because the task force as an entity, of course, won't be getting any budget. Like the task force as an entity is supporting individual agencies' budgets, but the agencies will have to make the budget request, receive the budget, and the most the task force can do is basically say, this is a really important priority, and a variety of agencies and external stakeholders have agreed on it. But nothing that the task force produces right now is going to show up in agencies' budgets unless they put it in there themselves.
Yes, thank you, Alan. Okay, I think we can move on, but I think this was good.
Okay, so Nick, thanks. Thank you. Thanks everyone for contributing. Again, this loops right back to Meredith's list that we keep calling for. So so if we can, get those in, then we can start to make some progress here. I just got a note, Stephanie from Sal Bernardino, who is with the DCBIA. He's still trying to get in. He has contributed very heavily into these conversations. So if we can just get him in. Nick, if you have his contact information, or if someone else in this call has the contact information for Sal to send to Stephanie, that would be helpful. Okay, so the workflow drainage complaints, and actually, Nick, this is your slide section. So if anybody else on this meeting right now can just drop Sal's information into the chat so that Stephanie can grab it and get him into the meeting, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I just shot Stephanie an email, so well, and
Great.
Sal too. So we'll see. Hopefully they can get in.
Great, thank you so much. So, okay, go ahead,
Yeah.
Nick. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so so the next 3 slides are going to be just an update on how we are thinking about this issue of drainage complaints and what the task force is going to do about it. And just this is more kind of like a roadmap over the next couple months of what DOE, DC Water, DDOT, and a couple other agencies need to think through. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get more clarity on roles and responsibilities. And so the little diagram at the right is kind of an example of where we want to get. We want to be able to say, like, okay, hey, there's water ponding on the street, and then depending on what the source is, a different agency will be responsible, or it might be the property owner. So if it's a clogged catch basin, that's DC Water. If it's not enough drainage inlets and how the road was designed, it's DDOT. If it's from a drain pipe that is like coming off the property, that's the property owner's problem. And what we're finding is that we do have a decent sense of who's supposed to do what, but there are a few tricky things that get bounced back between agencies, and it's pretty frustrating for residents to go from one agency to the other, and get told that this person can't do it, but maybe this person can. And so what we need to do is we need to have a very clear, I guess, diagram or list that every agency can reference, that we can make publicly available, and so that we never are in a position where we say, well, I can't do it, but maybe DDOT can. Instead, we will all reference the same piece of paper, the same diagram, and say, oh, this is your problem. I can't do it. For sure, DDOT can, or this is your problem, and in fact, no district agency can do it. I'm sorry. Here are some resources that may help you. So that's step 1 of what we need to do. And if you can see on the left, some deliverables. So there's going to be some kind of interagency agreement. Maybe it's a MOU. Maybe it's just all agreement on this diagram of complaints and responsible agencies. So I'm just highlighting here at the very bottom on the left. Two that we know are really tricky are groundwater that seeps onto sidewalks and roads. Who's responsible for that, and also underground streams that are under roadways. So those in particular are things we'll need to figure out. There may be others, but this is just kind of letting everybody know that this is on the task force's radar. This is one thing that we're definitely going to do. All right, next slide. So the other thing that we need to do in terms of drainage complaints is create some kind of centralized reporting database. What this will do is it'll provide an efficient way to document complaints and hand off from one agency to the other. And the handoffs will be according to what I just talked about in the previous slide. So we'll have like a very clear delineation of responsibilities, and we'll be able to assign agencies based on that. And the other good thing we'll do is we'll be able to create a lot of maps based on the data, the drainage complaints. We can use that in integrated flood model, and we can also use it, just as a way in some cases to show public where they're where the complaints are and what the status of their complaint is. And some of the information we may, if you entered a complaint, maybe we allow you to see it, but not see other complaints. Anyways, there's work to be done on what exactly can be seen by who, but ultimately the data I think will be useful. So things that we have to do in order to get there, we have to identify a software solution that will work across agencies, and then once we do identify and build that software, we'll need to make sure the use of it is kind of like integrated into internal agency procedures. So, right now, DOE might have a spreadsheet. We need to make sure that everybody that gets drainage complaints at DOE instead of the spreadsheet will upload or update whatever software we choose as a district-wide solution. So, if you go to the next slide, I just have a few examples of how this might work out. So if you see on the left here, this is, I'll show 3 examples of what happens when a complaint calls in. So in this example, person A is making a call to DOE. And this is, and so what we would do in this new scenario is we would enter it into a central database. We would do a desktop review. That's the little person in the computer. And then in this case, we'll say, you know what, this is not a DOE issue. This is a DC Water thing. And we'll assign it to DC Water within the database. And when we assign it to DC Water in the database, someone in DC Water will be notified that they have this new task to do. And then, they will respond probably as part of their own internal work order system. And then when they, close it out, they'll update the central database, and that'll be that. So if you hit next. So in example B, we have a person that calls DDOT, and here I'm making a distinction that people call whoever they feel like, they don't always know who to call. So sometimes they call DOE, sometimes they call DDOT, and sometimes they're right. Sometimes they made the right decision on who to call, sometimes they're wrong. So in this case, they're right. They called DDOT. DDOT would enter it into the central database. DDOT would do an initial review, and as part of that, they would confirm. They say, okay, yep, this is us. They would maybe make an update in their database, in the database, and then send somebody out from DDOT to resolve the complaint. And either the complaint is resolved, like they fix whatever needed to be fixed, or they make an update in the centralized database that, this is still a problem, but it will only be addressed via a capital infrastructure project, like replacing this whole road system or whatever. And that gets noted in the central database. So yes, so at least the customer knows that, yes, we know what the problem is, we know how to fix it, but it's just going to take a while because this is a larger problem. And then in the last example, person C calls DC Water, and there's a little note here that we've talked about previously that sometimes DC Water is overloaded with calls, like on September 10th. And if that's the case, the overload will go to 311, and then just as a way to get answer the phone quickly, but the data that 311 collects will then go back to DC Water. So then example C is a little bit different because DC Water operates a little bit differently. They receive, I think, the majority of these drainage complaint calls and handle the majority of them. And the way they do this is they have a pretty sophisticated work order system already. So we're not suggesting that they change that process. So in this example, the call comes into DC Water, it goes into their work order system. They begin to, they'll send somebody out or do a desktop review. And then there's kind of two options from there. Either one, after looking at it, they say, you know what, this is not a DC Water issue. Then they will, it'll either be an automatic push into the central database, or someone will make a new entry in the central database and assign it to a different agency, and then it can proceed, like I mentioned before, on the central database. The other option is that so somebody calls, it goes into the DC Water work order system. It is a DC Water issue, so DC Water resolves it, and they resolve it within their own DC Water work order system, and there's a duplicate entry that's created into the centralized database so that that we can keep track of it. So that's broadly how we're thinking about this central database and how it would work. Obviously we haven't figured out the details, and our plan is over the next couple of weeks to get all of the agencies that do receive drainage complaints together to talk about some potential software solutions. Octo, we did talk with Octo briefly about one way they might be able to help us, and it sounds pretty reasonable, but we want to share that with other agencies to get their opinion before we make any decisions. So that's where we are on the centralized drainage database. And that is all the updates I have for the drainage complaints section of this meeting. So any thoughts or questions? Salil, anything I left out?
No, you did a great job. Thank you for covering it. So just for clarification, this is a historical record. This is not a live working system. So this is after each agency has confirmed what they need to confirm, they will log it in. So there's a record of what areas of the city flood, which can then be shown graphically through Octo. So it's not recording events as they're happening live. That's what I was getting
Right.
at.
But maybe just to address, it's not like you won't be able to see a live updated map while it's raining about points popping up. Yeah, that's right.
The other thing we want from other agencies, if I know DC Water uses a maintenance management system, which is Maximo, and you say DOE uses an Excel spreadsheet. If other folks are using different systems, it'd be great for Octo to know that, so they can create a connection.
Yeah, I think for the agencies that like our agency that uses a spreadsheet, I think we would just as soon update. Like we would just put the information into this database rather than putting in a spreadsheet and then copying and pasting.
Right.
And I think our workflows are a little bit different. Like we don't, the calls we get are not like urgent calls. It's usually like, this has been happening, over the past month or whatever, please help us.
And the other issue that we don't need to cross right now, but we have to address, is how much of that will be public facing, because it could have property values and a whole bunch of other issues.
Yeah.
Nick, maybe you just answered my question in that you're imagining that the volume, if this were to go to DOE or DDOT, would be less. But would there be any plan if we were to go with option A or B to continue to have the 311 overflow option?
Yeah, so so I don't view, maybe I was unclear, but A, B, and C, like what you're seeing here is how it would, like, this is how the process would work once a centralized drainage database is in place. It's just kind of showing different use cases of how it would work. But specifically to your question on the overflow for 311, the way I was thinking about it is that that process doesn't change. You know, I know HCM and DC Water have been working together to make sure that there is that overflow capability. And so that would stay there. So in a heavy rain event where there is overflow, 311 would accept calls. Eventually, that information does go back to DC Water so that they can put it into Maximo. And so I think that little loop still happens, and then it proceeds along kind of like at the bottom that you see here.
Melissa, none of the individual processes that are currently occurring are changing. All Nick's talking about is creating a database at the back end so that we capture this information. So it doesn't stay in individual agencies. So there's a common platform to view it so we can act on it.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Uh-huh. Great job, Nick.
Thanks, Salil. You had a hand in this too. It's not on me.
Team effort, everybody. Do it.
Well, thanks, Nick. That's great. I mean, you know, we kind of went through this and making sure that it's so clear is the hardest part to visualize all of the coordination amongst agencies and how in real time things need to be shifted over is you did a great job in trying to show that. So I know the public appreciates it when they go back and look at this if they're not looking at it right now. Stephanie, just want to bring to your attention, we're still trying to get Sal into the call. I really do feel bad that he's not able to get in because he's trying very hard to do so. So I sent an email with you and him. So hopefully you'll be able to do that offline. Okay, so Nick, was there anything else you wanted to add to your presentation, or is there anybody else that would like to ask a question or share anything that would be helpful in that process?
No, but we are recording this, right? Yeah. I see.
Yes, we are
Yes,
definitely
I see
recording.
that.
So we can set it to Sal later.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's sounding more and more like this might be a WebEx issue,
Okay.
which means technical support is limited. But I will continue to work with him.
Okay, great. And maybe he can just call in too. That might be a thing. Okay, so final report layout information. Again, this is kind of like the Nick and Meredith show today. But Nick Bonard from DOEE, again, up to share what that layout looks like. Again, this is just the beginning. We are showing something that's a first blush. It is not at all the final product. So Nick, please share what we're thinking about.
Yes. All right, so you can go to the next slide. Jonathan from Demo mentioned about this final report, which you know, it's a good reminder on the timeline that it sounds like we have to get this late December, early January to you know, start going through the IQ process. But what will be in it? Well, I guess so. The first thing is a final PDF report, and I'll talk about a little bit what exactly is in it, but essentially it will combine all of these action plans that we have and like squish them together into one document. Plus, you know, it'll have an executive summary at the beginning and a couple of appendices and other stuff at the end. But that will be the final report from the task force. We're also planning to do some kind of interactive action plan webpage. And interactive is maybe too strong of a word, but it's essentially a web page where you'd be able to sort or view action plans by agency, by the year that they're supposed to be implemented, and by category. You know, we originally started with these 9 different categories: flood insurance, emergency response. You know, so which action plans are in which category. They can be a part of multiple, that's fine. So anyways, a way to make it a little bit easier because I think we've got 26 action plans, so a little bit easier to narrow down the action plans that that you in particular want to focus on, or the ones that we're working on this year. So that's how we're thinking about that. Next slide. So just as a, this is our draft outline of what the final table of contents will be. Like it'll be first an executive summary, which I think is self-explanatory. The second section will be like a summary of all the activities. So, we met every month and we had these number of meetings for the full task force. We had 2 listening sessions. And then, so then the third part will be the action plans, like literally every action plan back to back to back. The fourth section, we spent quite a bit of time in these action teams talking about funding options. We've done a couple of funding surveys. How are we thinking about funding? And so we'll include a little section about that there. And then we'll have an appendix, which will have all the agency acronyms, but also things like public comments that we received during the public listening session. We may or may not want to include public comments that we've received on the action plans. I guess we'll have to figure that out later, but those kinds of things in the appendix. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. And I don't know, maybe we also include this letter to the city administrator about budget support. But that's how we're thinking about it. Any suggestions or thoughts on that would be happy to hear.
Hey, Nick.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's covered here or in a future slide, but is there a process, and maybe that's through the annual, I guess, check-in that we're able to add new actions? Is there a process for
Yeah,
that?
good question. It sounds like there should actually be a number, 4.5 or something, where it's like, what's next for the task force, or like, how does this, yeah, so what our plans are for like meeting annually. I know we've talked generally about wanting to have like at least one right around budget time to like, confirm budget priorities. But yeah, we could also put in something about adding new action plans. I'm not sure. It's a good question about adding action plans. And I'd be curious what other people think. One idea is that after this point, we shift away from action plans and we just are doing like budget requests.
I think another option is to figure out how you're going to do progress reporting. And
Yeah.
that can be an opportunity to talk about tweaks or updates. My recommendation, and I think this is a longer discussion that might not be the right forum, but to integrate any progress reporting into either Resilient DC or Sustainable DC progress reporting as to not create a new system.
That sounds great.
But I'm
my biggest fear is having to do it.
Yeah, but also not volunteering to take on the process of getting all of that information necessarily, just publishing it.
Right.
So undoubtedly over time, new ideas are going to pop up that we want to capture in new projects. Is it possible to just do addenda rather than doing a full-fledged formal action plan? Just an addenda to the report or attachments to the reports as ideas come in and some things get done. Because it's all focused on the same topic. We don't need to answer it now. It's just something to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if maybe, so just my like my personal operational brain, once we approve this PDF, I don't want to touch it again, but maybe we can, maybe that's where what the interactive website comes in, is that can be updated with new actions as we see fit.
That's an idea for sure. The point is, what the task force did is pull together ideas and projects from different teams and agencies into one pot so that it's all focused on one goal. After it sunsets, as ideas come up, they'll again get dispersed. So try to keep them together.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was gonna say, Melissa, we may take you up on your, I guess, idea to have further conversation, because in my perfect world, we would not have as detailed reports as Climate Ready and Sustainable DC do, because that's a lot of effort. But obviously, we want to have some accountability for what we've kind of put together here. So trying to thread that needle.
Yeah, my initial thought is that it makes sense to be a text box in one of those reports that summarizes sort of qualitatively progress over the last year.
Yeah. That sounds very doable. Can write a text box.
Yeah, thanks for the input, everybody. I think we want to focus on doing the work and definitely show that we're making progress on the work without making more work for ourselves on just showing that work is being done, but also keeping accountability. So, yeah, it's challenging.
Well said, Meredith.
But I think we could easily, in the summary of task force activities, add a future section to say, you know, what our future plans are for check-ins and keeping things going. We'll come up with something and update everybody in our next meeting.
Okay, so it sounds like we have folks have given their thoughts, and sounds like Melissa's on the hook for a little bit more help here, as well as a few others.
Sorry, Monty. Before we move on, I got a ping from Mr. Tom Glassick that said he had a related but non-substantive question comment. And before we move on, I just want to give him the opportunity to jump in on that.
Sure, great. Please, Tom, if you want to come off mute or put your information in the chat, your question or comment in the chat.
Wow. Okay.
Stephanie,
Okay.
okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I would talk to Lisa about this. You saw that Lisa made partner, right?
Not sure what's.
You went back on mute.
Yeah. I keep seeing it click off and on. Let me see if I can ping him, and I'll have him unmute himself.
Okay. We'll just wait just a minute as we work through the technical background here, trying to get our question or comment.
Would now be a good time to make my frivolous comment?
Please, yeah, we're waiting for you. Thank you, Mr.
So
Glassy.
I am new to the DCI. Well, not new to DCI. I was born in DC. I am a big flood nerd. Actually was Barney Frank's insurance counsel, and he hated insurance, so it made me do all of the work. But so just last month, a flood and climate happy hour that used to happen for years restarted in person. And I was talking to Fetmano, who you all remember from Fetmano's there, and I said, how do we get an email list of the flood task force people I mean, it's a lot of, well, it's a lot of flood nerds, but it's FEMA people, it's people from the Corps, it's people who used to, I mean, who all work in the space. Obviously, the floodplain managers are there. It's never more than like 20-ish people. But if you want to get me an email list, I will add everyone to it, or I can send one of you the calendar invite. It would be, I cannot tell you that when I mention to non-flood friends that there's a flood and climate happy hour, their eyes don't glaze over and say, "Are you crazy?" But so I like I said, related but not substantively related to what you're doing. So just if you'll just shoot me an email, I'll happily set it up, and it's just good resources. I do the insurancy side, but to be able to talk to the science people when we're getting ready to reauthorize flood in the Congress and that kind of thing. So we would like to include, I just need help doing it.
If you, I think we've traded emails before, but please send me an email, and then the next, like with the information about the next one, and I can send it to the action team so they can
Yeah,
they can
and I was just
decide
gonna
if they'd like to go.
I was just going to suggest, Tom, if you put your information in the chat and also send it to Nicholas Bonnard. Why don't you put your contact information in the chat, and that way make it very easy, be two-way, and we don't lose the contact. But that's great, and I think we've all become flood nerds. So, at least a lot of folks on my team for sure who were not in this space, but we are happy to serve in this kind of way. But it's quite interesting, especially the insurance piece. I think that folks with Jed Ross's agency as well as Disby have done a great job helping us and unlocking our brain on the intricacies and all the rabbit holes that you can go down. So thank you for bringing it up. It's been fun, and I know Nick and folks at DOE have jumped head into by bringing in some experts to speak to this task force as well. So we've all become that. So thank you. Not a frivolous comment. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to go. If there's any other questions about this section, please come off mute and speak up and give us some ideas and thoughts about the final report. Again, thank you both for Misia, Salil, and Mayor. I'm sorry, Melissa, for sharing your thoughts. Okay, all right, we're going to go ahead. So wow, we have blown through this meeting. We gave a 2-hour time balance for the meeting, knowing that as a combined meeting that we would maybe could have big conversations, or maybe it's just so on point that we'll just zip through it. So it might be giving you some time back here. But before that, we will go over our next steps and our closeouts of today's meeting. And maybe there's a little conversation here too, but Nick, I think that you are doing this as well. So, Nick Bonnard from DOE.
I think I was taking this one on.
Okay,
See,
yeah.
every
It
time
can
I
go
mention
either
it's
way.
Nick. No, see, I have been saying Meredith, and now it's Nick. So, Meredith, okay, it's your turn. Thanks, Meredith.
So this is just a reminder of all the action plans and where we are with these in our voting process. And everyone should have gotten an email this morning from the Flood Task Force with a reminder with the same information. And if you're an owner of one of these action plans, it is your responsibility to make updates prior to the task force meeting. Actually, a little earlier than that date. Can you go back up, please? Okay, so our batch 3 action plans, there's 3 slides here that cover all of these action plans. These were out for agency or for flood task force review. That comment period has closed. So any comments now are sent to the owners of the plans. And if your name is next to one of these plans, it's your responsibility to make the updates to that. And Nick, could you chime in on what the deadline is for making those updates?
Yes. So I just sent this morning.
Yeah.
A couple minutes
Friday,
before.
November 11th. I see it now.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, before the meeting. So yeah, so it's got about a week basically to make the changes if there are any. I think a lot of the plans they didn't receive that much. But make the changes so that we can send the changed versions out to everybody on Monday before the task force meeting, so that you and your voting members can have a review what you're voting on before the 16th.
Yes, so we have 15 plans that we'll vote on November 16th, and that vote will be to release these plans for public comment. So they've been through task force internal review now, and then the next step is to put them out for public comment. Okay, so this is one of 3 of our lists, so you can go ahead, jump ahead to, this is our second group here, and the third. Yes, so all of these will be voted on to release for public comment. And then
actually,
batch 2. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
real quick on batch 3, the link that we sent out is a link that just contains like PDFs and actually one Word document of the comments. And the comments, I'm trying to think of, like, some comments are specific to like one action plan, and some comments have like a couple action plans. So you just have to go and look at the comments to see if your action plan is affected.
Do you want to pick this one up, Nick?
Sure.
Or, okay.
Wait, was that what I was just talking about? I got
I don't know.
confused.
So batch 2, I can lead it. Batch 2 was out for public comment. Public comment closed last week. And now at the task force meeting, November 16th, we'll vote on the final acceptance approval of these action plans.
Yes, sorry, I jumped ahead of you, Meredith. This is the one
Okay.
that if you go to the link, there's a couple, I think there's like maybe 4 or 5 public comments. So yeah, if you're one of these agencies, DC Water, DEMWA, DCRA, now DOB, and HSEMA, you have to go check out that link, see if the comments are relevant to you, and then make any updates as necessary. And then just so it's clear, on batch 3, which is those 15 different action plans, we have not received any like email comments, but if there are any comments, they are going to be as like track changes or like Microsoft Office comment in the document. So just go into those documents and see if anyone's made any changes.
Any questions on that? On the comments to the plans? What you need to do for editing or a plan for voting? Okay, it's all clear. And there is an email on this. So check your email. That gives the specific instructions.
Meredith, I did want to just bring up a note that the assignments to DCRA, they will be updated with the new agency. So this will be revised for that. And whoever was at DCRA knows that this is their assignment now in the new the Department of Buildings. So, okay. I did want to back up a little bit and just give one comment. I think that Nick mentioned that the final report as we put it together will be submitted to the city administrator. But before we submit to the city administrator the final report, we will have a briefing meeting with the city administrator to kind of give a foreshadow of what's to come. So that'll be worked out at some point in advance of our February delivery of the final report. So just to kind of put a little update in how that schedule is going to work, or that scheduling. Okay, so I think that we are done with this. Let's the homework. Meredith, you want to help share the homework?
Nick and I will arm wrestle for this. No. So I think we covered all of this essentially, including the incorporating public comments, member comments. We've got these 2 batches. Please let us know what FY24 budget requests are going in so we can include that in the the list to vote at November 16th, and then also in the memo, we'll prepare for the city administrator. And make sure everybody's ready. That says November 17th. I think it's November 16th.
Yeah.
It is November
Is that right?
16th. I was
Yeah.
just looking at that.
So November 16th is our task force meeting. We'll be doing lots of voting, so make sure everybody's ready. Prep your agency director or representative for the meeting.
Yeah, and we have most agencies represented today. Just want to make sure that we have talked about the budget requests over several meetings now. I think that the window is closing. So, so this is kind of it. And in order for us to have that coordinated, effort in saying, hey, the flood task force is standing behind this as well. Now we've talked about in today's conversation about creating some kind of memo to send up to the budget review team as well. So we cannot stress it more than this. This is it. The window is closing. So if it's not here, there's not much that this combined coordinated body can do to help push this along. And again, the point is for flood resiliency. So thank you for that. All right, next slide, please. All right, I'll take these. Again, to remind everyone, the full task force meetings on November 16th from 2 to 4. We hopefully will have your directors there, as well as and we actually have a few directors on the call now, as well as a representative that can vote on behalf of your agency. So it's just really important. These flood task force meetings were, again, winding down. We're voting out these batches for the action plans, and we just want to make sure that we have agencies that are affected or participating represented. And then we'll have our next combined action team meeting on December 9th. And that'll be on a Friday, 10:30 to 12:30. Again, we're using that 2-hour time frame just to give us time to make sure we have full conversations on the items that we're putting on the agenda. But if we don't use all the time, we'll give it back. And next slide after that, please. Well, there you go. We're all done. It's 11:41. We really appreciate everybody coming out. We typically have a good turnout. Today was no different. We had about 35 participants at the peak. And we appreciate you all for staying on the call for so long. Sorry to those that had such difficulty getting on. This recording will be posted on the website so that you will be able to at least hear the content of the conversation, because we did go over some detail that has not been revealed before or discussed before. And just can't stress enough about the budget stuff, so I won't do that. But I want to say happy Friday and thank you for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for including.
And thanks, Tom Glassick, the flood nerd. We appreciate you.
I hope to see you it's the third Thursday. I'm about to send the invitation to Nick. So thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.